The scent of my sister Loretta's famous 7-cheese mac and cheese usually felt like a warm hug, but that day, it was just another thing that reminded me of Geneva. My wife had always said Loretta's cooking was the only thing that could make her forgive our family's foolishness. Looking around the crowded living room of Loretta's house, I saw a whole lot of foolishness Geneva would have had to forgive. It had been nearly 8 months since we buried her, and the ache in my chest was a constant dull throb. But today was for my great niece Serenity, who was turning 1. I had to put on a brave face. The room was buzzing with life. Old-school soul music played low on the stereo, a soft backdrop to the chatter and laughter of cousins and aunties. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching the glitter on a big Happy First Birthday banner taped to the wall. Kids ran underfoot, chasing balloons, their squeals mixing with the deeper tones of the men debating something about football in the corner. I sat in a plush armchair, a plate of food I hadn't touched balanced on my lap, watching my sister hold court. Loretta moved through the party like a queen in her own palace. She was 2 years younger than my 70, but carried herself with an energy that made me feel 100. She'd always had that spark, that need to be the center of everything. Even now, holding baby Serenity, she wasn't just a mother, she was a performer. "Isn't she just the prettiest thing you ever did see?" she'd crow to anyone who passed, tilting Serenity's head to show off the little gold earrings that I knew for a fact she'd pierced herself. I watched Serenity, a beautiful, round-faced baby with big, curious eyes. She was the spitting image of her father, a man who had vanished from Loretta's life the moment she told him she was pregnant. My sister had cried on my shoulder for weeks, and Geneva and I had stepped in. We bought the crib, the diapers, the car seat. Geneva, bless her heart, had even started a small college fund for the baby, a secret she'd shared with me just weeks before the cancer came back for the last time. "Every child deserves a fighting chance, Eleanor," she'd said, her voice raspy but firm. "Especially one coming into this messy family." Now, that messy family was all I had left. My own children, Jamal and Keisha, were grown with lives of their own. They called, they sent money sometimes, but they were busy. It was Loretta who I saw every week at church, Loretta who was supposed to be my rock. But ever since Geneva passed, there'd been a strange distance between us, a chill I couldn't quite put my finger on. She'd look at me with something that felt like pity, but it was sharp around the edges. "All right, everybody, time for cake!" Loretta's voice boomed, cutting through the noise. The crowd shifted, gathering around the dining room table where a giant pink and white cake sat like a monument. Everyone started singing Happy Birthday, their voices a cheerful, slightly off-key chorus. I pushed myself up from the chair, my knees protesting, and joined the circle. I wanted to see Serenity's face when she got her first taste of sugar. As the song ended in a round of applause, Loretta held up a hand. Wait, before we cut the cake," she said, her voice taking on a serious, dramatic tone. The room quieted down. She looked around, making eye contact with our cousins, our church friends, our shared history. Her eyes, so much like mine but colder, finally landed on me. "There's something I need to say," she began, her voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. "Something I've been holding in for a long, long time, out of respect for the grieving process." A nervous murmur went through the room. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. This was her stage, and we were all her audience. She clutched Serenity to her chest. The baby, sensing the shift in mood, started to fuss. "This past year has been hard on all of us. We lost a pillar of our family. We lost my sister-in-law, Geneva." She paused, letting the name hang in the air. A few people nodded sadly. My own eyes welled up, the grief ambushing me as it always did. "But what you all don't know," Loretta continued, her voice rising, "is that Geneva left behind more than just memories. She left a legacy." She looked directly at me, a strange, triumphant glint in her eye. "You see, everyone thinks Serenity is just my baby. But that's not the whole truth." The The silence in the room was so thick I could feel it pressing on my skin. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a car passing on the street. Loretta took a deep breath, like an actress about to deliver her most important line. "Serenity is Geneva's child, too." A collective gasp went through the room. My mind went blank. The words didn't make sense. It was like hearing a foreign language. People started whispering, turning to stare at me. My face grew hot with confusion and a creeping, horrible shame. "What are you talking about, Loretta?" I managed to say, my voice a dry croak. "Oh, Eleanor," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I'm so sorry you have to find out this way. Geneva and I, we had a special bond. She always wanted a child more than anything. We made a plan. We used a donor. She was going to be Serenity's other mother, her provider. We were going to tell you, but then she got sick so fast." The lie was monstrous, a twisting of the beautiful love I had shared with my wife for 42 years. Geneva and I had been inseparable. She told me everything. This story was a fiction, a cheap, ugly drama my sister was inventing for an audience. But why? Before I could even form a protest, Loretta reached into the diaper bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't pull out a wipe or a rattle. She pulled out a folded sheaf of papers. "And she made sure her daughter would be taken care of," Loretta announced, her voice hard as steel. She unfolded the document with a sharp snap. "This is her real will, the last one she ever signed." My heart stopped. Geneva's will? We had made our wills together years ago with our lawyer, Mr. DeMarco. Everything went to me, just as all of mine went to her. It was simple. It was ironclad. "She wrote this a month before she passed," Loretta said, projecting her voice so everyone in the room could hear. She began to read from the paper in a loud, clear voice. "I, Geneva Haywood, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." She skipped down the page, her finger tracing a line of text. "And to my beloved daughter, Serenity Monroe, born of a sacred pact between myself and her mother, Loretta Monroe, I leave a 50% share of the ownership and equity of my primary residence, located at 412 Maple Street." The address of the house I was living in, the home Geneva and I had bought together when we were barely 30, the place we had filled with a lifetime of love, laughter, and memories. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Whispers turned into shocked murmurs. Auntie Pearl's hand flew to her mouth. My son Jamal's best friend, Darnell, who had come to represent my side of the family, just stared, his jaw slack. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me, judging me, pitying me. They were seeing a fool, an old woman whose wife had not only cheated on her with her own sister, but had written her out of half her own home to prove it. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot wave that washed over me, leaving me cold and trembling. Loretta folded the paper with a smug finality. She looked at me, her face a mask of cruel victory. The baby in her arms started to cry in earnest, her small wails filling the stunned silence. "The lawyer will be in touch, Eleanor," Loretta said, her voice low enough that only I and those closest could hear. "He said you have 30 days to decide whether you want to buy out my daughter's half or if we need to put the house up for sale." Sale. Sell my home. The place where Geneva's scent still lingered in the closets, where her favorite reading glasses were still on the nightstand. The thought was a punch to the gut. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my chest as I fought for air. The room began to spin, the faces of my family blurring into a kaleidoscope of shock and suspicion. Through the fog of pain and disbelief, one clear, cold thought cut through the noise. I could see Geneva's face in my mind, the way she'd looked at me after her first cancer surgery years ago, the one that had left her sterile. The doctors had been clear. She could never have a biological child. It was a grief we had processed and moved past together, a sad chapter that had only deepened our bond. Loretta's story wasn't just a lie, it was an impossible one. And as I looked at my sister, who was now trying to soothe the crying baby she was using as a weapon, I felt something shift inside me. The crushing weight of grief and humiliation began to burn away, replaced by a cold, hard anger. She had desecrated my wife's memory. She had tried to steal our home, and she had done it in front of everyone we knew. Loretta had made a terrible mistake. She thought she was kicking a poor, grieving old woman when she was down. She didn't know my Geneva, and she was about to find out just who Eleanor Haywood was without her other half. The fight for my home, for Geneva's honor, and for that innocent baby's future had just begun. Before we continue, quick question. What would you do in this situation? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. The world narrowed to the space between me and Loretta. The sounds of the party, the music, the chatter, the crying baby, faded into a dull roar, like the ocean heard from inside a seashell. My sister's face, so smug and satisfied, was the only thing I could see clearly. For a split second, I wanted to lunge across the cake and snatch that fraudulent piece of paper from her hand, to scream at her until my voice gave out. But I saw Geneva's face in my mind, her calm, steady eyes. "Don't let them see you sweat, Elle," she used to say. "Dignity is a weapon they can't take from you." I took a shaky breath, pulling what was left of my composure around me like a thin shawl. I looked past Loretta, my gaze sweeping over the faces of my family and friends. Some looked away, ashamed. Others stared back, their eyes filled with a greedy curiosity. They had already chosen their side. They had believed the lie. Without a word, I turned and walked toward the front door. The crowd parted for me like I was a ghost. I could feel their eyes on my back. As I reached for the doorknob, a hand gently touched my arm. It was Darnell, my son Jamal's old friend. He was a good boy, a man now, with kind eyes like his mother's. "Mrs. Haywood," he said, his voice low and full of concern. "Are you all right? Do you need a ride?" I shook my head, managing a weak smile for him. "Thank you, Darnell, but I'm fine. I just need to go home." "This is wrong," he muttered, glancing back at Loretta with disgust. "All wrong. If you need anything at all, you call me. Don't you hesitate." "I will," I promised, my voice thick with unshed tears. His small act of kindness was a life raft in an ocean of betrayal. I squeezed his hand and slipped out the door, escaping into the cool afternoon air. The drive home was a blur. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, and my mind raced, replaying the scene over and over. Loretta's triumphant voice, the gasp from the crowd, the address of my own home being read aloud like a prize in a wicked lottery. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the anger had curdled into a deep, soul-crushing sorrow. I walked into the quiet house, and the silence was deafening. This was my sanctuary, the place where every corner held a memory of Geneva. Now, it felt tainted, like a crime scene. I sank onto the sofa, the same one where Geneva and I had spent countless evenings watching our shows, her feet propped up in my lap. I dropped my face into my hands, and finally let the sobs come. Great, ragged tears for my wife, for our life, for the ugliness that had just been unleashed upon her memory. How could Loretta do this? My own sister. We had helped her more times than I could count. When she lost her job, Geneva co-signed for a loan so she wouldn't be evicted. When her good-for-nothing ex-husband left her, we were the ones who helped her pack up her life and move into her new place. Geneva had a boundless heart, especially for family. And this was how Loretta repaid her? By painting her as a liar and a cheat to steal our home? After the storm of tears passed, I felt hollowed out, empty. I sat there for what felt like hours, just staring at the framed photo on the mantelpiece. It was from our 40th anniversary. We were standing in our backyard, arm in arm, the setting sun making our gray hairs sparkle. Geneva was beaming, her smile so wide it made her eyes crinkle at the corners. That was my wife, full of light and love, not the scheming, secretive person Loretta had described. Then, something flickered in my memory. A conversation from a few months before Geneva passed. She'd been having a good day, sitting up in bed and sorting through a box of old papers. She was weaker, but her mind was as sharp as ever. "You know, Elle," she'd said, her voice a little raspy, "people can get real ugly when they think there's money on the table." I'd waved it off. "We don't have to worry about that, honey. Everything's taken care of." She had looked at me with that intense gaze of hers. "Just promise me something. If things ever get messy, you go back to where we started. All the answers you'll ever need are right where our dreams began." At the time, I thought she was being poetic, talking about our love. But now, where our dreams began. My mind raced back decades, to two young women in their late 20s pooling every penny they had. I remembered the day we signed the papers for this house, our first big dream together. My heart started to pound. I pushed myself off the sofa, my old knees groaning in protest, and headed for the hall closet. I pulled the string for the attic light and carefully climbed the rickety pull-down ladder. The air up here was thick with the smell of dust and time. In the far corner, behind a stack of old holiday decorations, was a worn cardboard box labeled 412 Maple Saint, the beginning. I dragged the heavy box into the light. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. On top were old photographs of us painting the living room, a dried corsage from our first formal housewarming party, and under that, the original deed to the house. I dug deeper, past faded receipts and appliance warranties from the 1980s. My fingers brushed against a large, sealed manila envelope. It was thick and heavy. Written across the front in Geneva's elegant, familiar script was one word: Eleanor. I carried the envelope back downstairs as if it were a sacred text. Sitting at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd paid bills and planned vacations, I carefully broke the seal. The first thing I saw was a letter. "My dearest Eleanor," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and someone has tried to hurt you. I suspect I know who. For months I've seen the greed in Loretta's eyes. I've heard the little comments, the probing questions about our finances. She thinks you are weak without me. She is a fool." My breath hitched. Geneva knew. She knew. "I couldn't tell you my suspicions while I was alive. You had enough on your heart, and I didn't want you to live in fear. I wanted our last days to be about us, about our love. But I am not leaving you unprotected. I spent my last good weeks gathering everything you would need to fight. Your strength has always been in your heart, my love. I'm just giving you the armor to protect it. In this envelope, you will find justice. Use it. Do not be afraid. Make them pay for disrespecting our life together. I will be watching over you. Always. Your loving wife, Geneva." Tears streamed down my face, but this time they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of overwhelming love and gratitude. My fierce, brilliant Geneva. She had been protecting me, even from beyond the grave. Wiping my eyes, I pulled out the contents of the envelope. It was a file, meticulously organized. The first document was a set of medical records, stamped and notarized by a law office. The header was from the hospital, dated 20 years ago. The report was clear, clinical, and undeniable. A detailed account of the radical hysterectomy that had saved Geneva's life from her first bout with cancer. A procedure that made it biologically impossible for her to ever conceive a child. Next was a folder of financial statements. It contained the paperwork for the college fund Geneva had opened for Serenity, with a deposit of $5,000. There were also copies of cashed checks and bank transfers made to Loretta over the past 10 years, totaling over $20,000, all marked as personal loan. There wasn't a single record of repayment. And then I found a small digital audio recorder. My hands shook as I pressed the play button. A hiss, and then Loretta's voice, whiny and familiar. "It's just not fair. Geneva, you two have this big house, all this security. I'm out here raising a baby by myself. You owe me. Family is supposed to help family." Then Geneva's voice, tired but firm. "Helping you is one thing, Loretta. Enabling you is another. This is the last loan. You need to learn to stand on your own feet." There was a pause, then Loretta's voice turned venomous. "Fine, be that way. But you mark my words. One way or another, I'm going to get what my baby and I are owed." The recording clicked off. I sat back, stunned. Geneva had recorded her. She had proof of Loretta's entitlement, her greed, her threat. It was all here. The lie about the baby, the motive, the forged will. It would all crumble against this mountain of truth. A fire I hadn't felt in months ignited in my soul. The grief was still there, but now it had a purpose. It was fuel. Loretta had started a war based on lies, counting on me to be a broken old woman, but she hadn't counted on Geneva. I picked up my phone, my fingers steady. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Arthur DeMarco, Escriel, our lawyer for 30 years. A man who had known us both as clients and as friends. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm and professional. "DeMarco speaking." I took a deep, steadying breath, the evidence laid out on the table in front of me like a battle plan. "Arthur," I said, my voice clear and cold as ice. "It's Eleanor Haywood. My sister just declared war on me at a 1-year-old's birthday party, and thanks to my wife, I have everything I need to burn her kingdom to the ground." The next morning, I walked into Arthur DeMarco's office feeling like a soldier preparing for battle. His firm was on the top floor of the old Liberty Bank building, a landmark in our community, and the space felt solid, respectable. The walls were lined with degrees and photos of him with important-looking people, but the photo on his desk was of him and his wife, arms around their grandkids. He was a man who understood family. He was also a man who did not play. Arthur, a sharp-dressed man in his early 70s with a neat gray mustache and eyes that missed nothing, listened without interruption as I laid out the whole ugly story. I placed the manila envelope on his polished mahogany desk. He put on his reading glasses and examined each piece of Geneva's evidence with a grim, focused intensity. He read the medical report, his jaw tightening. He scanned the financial records, shaking his head slowly. Finally, he pressed play on the little recorder. When Loretta's venomous voice filled the quiet office, Arthur took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked at me, and the professional calm in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold fire. "Eleanor," he said, his voice a low rumble, "this is more than just a family squabble. Forging a will is a serious crime, a felony. We could have her facing prison time." The word prison hung in the air. As much as I hated what Loretta had done, the thought of my own sister behind bars sent a shiver through me. "Arthur, what I want, what I need, is to clear Geneva's name and protect my home. I want her to admit what she did, and I want her to leave me the hell alone." He nodded, understanding. "Then we proceed with a clear strategy. We don't just react, we attack, but with precision. We will send her a cease and desist letter, officially putting her and her attorney on notice that we know the will is a fraudulent document. But before we do that," he leaned forward, "we give her one chance to surrender. You will confront her, Eleanor. You will present her with the evidence of her own destruction. You will do it calmly, and you will have a witness." He was right. This couldn't be a screaming match. It had to be an execution. "Darnell," I said immediately. "He was at the party. He knows what she did." "Perfect," Arthur said, already making notes. "I'll have a paralegal draft a confession for her to sign on the spot, admitting to the forgery and renouncing all claims. It's a long shot, but if she signs it, this whole nightmare could be over by sundown. If she doesn't," he paused, his gaze hardening, "then we unleash the full force of the law. We'll file a civil suit for fraud and intentional infliction of emotional distress, and I will personally deliver this file to the district attorney's office." An hour later, I was in the passenger seat of Darnell's car, my purse on my lap feeling as heavy as a briefcase full of bricks. Inside were copies of Geneva's file and the confession Arthur's office had drafted. Darnell drove, his hands steady on the wheel, his presence a silent, comforting pillar of support. When we pulled up to Loretta's small rental house, my heart was hammering against my ribs. I took a deep breath, picturing Geneva's smile. Dignity is a weapon, Elle. I walked up the cracked concrete path and knocked on the door. It swung open and Loretta stood there, baby Serenity balanced on her hip. When she saw me, her face was a mask of wary surprise. Then her eyes flickered to Darnell standing behind me, and her expression soured. "What do you want?" she snapped, trying to shut the door. I put my hand flat against it, my strength surprising both of us. "We need to talk, Loretta. It's in your best interest to let us in." My voice was low and even, with a steel edge I hadn't heard in it for years. Something in my tone must have spooked her, because she backed away, letting us into her cluttered living room. It smelled of stale air and sour milk. She put Serenity in a playpen in the corner, where the baby immediately started fussing. "If you came here to beg, you're wasting your time," Loretta sneered, crossing her arms. "My lawyer says my case is solid." I didn't say a word. I simply opened my purse, took out the folder, and laid the first document on her coffee table. It was the cover page of Geneva's medical file. "Do you remember when Geneva had her surgery? The one that saved her life 20 years ago?" I asked softly. Loretta frowned. "What does that have to do with anything?" "It has everything to do with it." I slid the full report out. "This is the file from her radical hysterectomy, the procedure that made it physically impossible for her to ever have a biological child. There was no donor, Loretta, because there were no eggs to fertilize. Serenity is not Geneva's daughter. You and I both know that." The color drained from her face. She stared at the paper, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. That's a fake," she stammered. I ignored her and laid down the next file. "And this is the record of the $22,450 in loans, Geneva, and I gave you over the last decade, loans you never repaid. She didn't owe you a thing, Loretta. She had already given you more than enough." Loretta's eyes darted around the room as if looking for an escape. Her bravado was crumbling. "She wanted to help me. She loved me." "Did she?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. I took out the small digital recorder and pressed play. Loretta's own voice, sharp and greedy, filled the tense silence. "You mark my words. One way or another, I'm going to get what my baby and I are owed." I clicked it off. The silence that followed was absolute. Loretta stared at the recorder as if it were a snake. She started to tremble, a rage building behind her eyes. "You were recording me? You witch! That's illegal! I'll sue you!" That's when I stood up. I was done being quiet. I was done being the victim. I was Eleanor Haywood, Geneva's wife, and this was my house, my life. "Geneva recorded you," I said, my voice ringing with authority. "She knew this was coming. She knew your heart was rotten with envy. You took her love, her kindness, and her money, and when she was on her deathbed, you plotted to steal her legacy. You stood up in front of our family, our church family, and you called my wife an adulterer. You used your own daughter as a prop in your disgusting little play to make me homeless." I stepped closer, my shadow falling over her. "You are not a victim here, Loretta. You are a thief and a liar. I threw the confession Arthur had drafted onto the table. This is your one and only chance to walk away. You will sign this, admitting you forged the will. You will go to every person who was at that party and tell them you lied. The college fund Geneva set up for Serenity remains. A trust will be established that you can never, ever touch. But you will not get another dime from me or from Geneva's memory for the rest of your life. It's over. For a moment, I thought she might actually break. Her face crumpled. But it wasn't with remorse. It was with pure, unadulterated rage. "Never!" she shrieked, her face contorting into an ugly mask. She swiped the papers off the table, sending them scattering across the floor. "You think you've won? I'll destroy you. I'll tell everyone you're a bitter old crone who's forging evidence to cheat a poor, innocent baby out of her birthright." She was completely unhinged, her voice rising to a hysterical scream. "I did it! You hear me? I made that will myself, and I deserve that house. Geneva owed it to me. She owed me." As her confession, raw and hideous, echoed in the small room, there was a sharp knock at the door. Darnell, who had stood silently by the entrance the whole time, opened it. Standing on the doorstep, their faces pale with shock, were Auntie Pearl and two of our cousins from church. They had a Tupperware container in their hands, probably leftovers from the party. They had heard it all. Loretta froze, her hand still in the air from her frantic gestures, her mouth agape. The hateful words she had just screamed hung in the air, witnessed, undeniable. The trap, so carefully laid by my brilliant wife, had finally, irrevocably, snapped shut. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.